car because I left my notes in the car, but the car wasn't there. So I started to panic a little bit. So I come in and I see her. I'm like, where's the car? And I know if you've had my class before, you're thinking, you have notes? Really, you use notes? And the answer is sometimes. Sometimes I do. But today I have notes. So we'll see how that goes. But we are in the book of James. And James, are we good?
Yes.
All right. We got a couple James in here. I don't know if you all know, my first name is actually James. Everybody calls me Adam. That's what my parents called me. But
They call you James Adam, and then you know you're in trouble.
yes, they were kind of hippies. So discipline wasn't like a big thing in our house. You may have picked up on that, like if you know me.
Yes.
I mean, look at the pants, right?
I know your mom, and she still has that little flavor to her.
She does. And my father was worse. So, yeah. He was, rest in peace. But yeah. But we got a lot of James for the purpose of this class. I will go with James. And so being in the book of James, this quarter really, I think, can get as real as we all want it to get, right? Because we're talking about Christian living here. And so we can refer back to the Bible and their stories and keep it kind of distant, or we can be sharing our lives and bringing our own experiences and our own stories into it and to make it a little more real if you guys want to do that. There's certainly that opportunity. But today we'll cover a little bit, and then it'll be more of a topical story where each week I think we'll kind of tackle a bit of a topic and maybe jump around to some of the different scriptures rather than just straight reading through the book. That's really up to Mark to decide. But if you were here last week, one thing that I mentioned last week is that I like the book of James in that it's a letter to the church. Right, and what I mean by that, it's not a letter to a church. When we go through the epistles, we've got a letter to the church in Rome. We've got a letter to the Corinthians, to the Galatians, to the Ephesians. Right, we've got a letter to these specific groups of believers in specific places, addressing specific topics. And not to say that any of that is irrelevant for our Christian walk, right? All Scripture is God-inspired. All of it is good for correcting, rebuking, and teaching, right? 1 Timothy 3. So it's all relevant for our Christian walk. But when we get to a book like James, which is addressed to the church, we're part of the church, right? And so it's not hard to connect the dots between what they're talking about for the church back then and the church today. So let's just give you an example of what I mean by something like that. When was the last time in your Christian walk, in your worship, in your Christian living, that you had to deal with somebody eating meat that was sacrificed to idols? I did see your comment this morning, by the way. So you thought about it, right? Yeah. Do you remember what your comment was?
You're talking to him, realize you're talking to me.
I'm talking to you, yeah. When was the last time any of us had to deal with that, right? Ever? Maybe if you were, some different religion, but I in my Christian life have never had to deal with that. Be interesting to talk about. One of my favorite topics, and that joke lands better if you know I'm a vegetarian, and I've been a vegetarian for like 40 years, but we don't have to deal with that, right? We've never had to deal with that. How about when is the last time you had to deal with somebody speaking in tongues that didn't have an interpreter? We may get a hand for this one. Has anyone had to deal with that before? Has anyone ever participated in a Pentecostal church, visited one?
This year.
We had a friend in our old church that went to a camp with another group. Did I interrupt him? No. Okay.
That's encouraged.
He had no idea what he was in for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Long time ago, it's been a long time, I went to a Pentecostal church just to see what they did.
Yeah, same with me.
And I got up about 3/4 way through and left. Honestly. And it was, I couldn't imagine. They thought faith was everything.
Yep. So it still happens today, yeah? So, and maybe we've experienced, I'm like you, when I was in college, we were kind of trying everything, just not for the purpose of converting, but just to see how other people worshiped. And I had a similar experience. In the Church of Christ, I've yet, in my Church of Christ practices to experience that. So, how about this third one? How about, when was the last time you had to deal with, I don't want to mess this one up, right? Someone in the church sleeping with his father's wife. Now, wouldn't that be your mother? And I'm bad with family trees, but and maybe someone has, but I have not. Right, so that's not something you want to deal with in your congregation, right? So those were specific topics that letters were written to and addressed to in the New Testament, right? Letters to specific churches. So let's take this a different direction. So when is the last time in your Christian walk that you've had to deal with making good choices? Has anyone had to lately or a long time ago deal with making good choices in their Christian life? About every day, right? I'm seeing some nods. I'm seeing some more hands. Right. How about dealing with this? This is a bit of a loaded topic, but it's in the Bible, so we're going to talk about it. How about dealing with any kind of class struggle? You know, kind of a rich versus poor, have versus have not situation in our country, in our congregations. Have we ever had to deal with those topics? Yeah. How about, have you ever had to deal with putting too much stock in the stuff that you have? Right, like the things that you have and want to buy, and materialism. Yes, sir.
When Steve and I had been married about 3 years, we had some best friends, and we went to the flea market every month with them. Mm-hmm. And they bought more stuff, and I got caught up. I wanted, to buy stuff too, and I started buying stuff, and we finally had to decide we weren't going to go with them anymore. Because, they were bad influences. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds silly, but it did.
If your hand causes you to sin, then cut it off, right? Just sever that relationship. No, it's not silly at all. Making good decisions, right? That's part of the doing well. Yeah, it's both. How about, I'm not saying this anyone in this room, but have you ever had to deal with, or knew people that had to deal with treating some people in the church even better than other people? You know what I mean? Like some people you show preference to, you treat them one way, but other people you treat another way in the church, right? Maybe that's something that we've had to deal with. How about, I think this could be a popular one. It's something I deal with. How about watching what we say? Having to struggle with the words that we use, what we say, or what we fail to say, right? And then just one other example here, a big one. Do we ever have to deal in our Christian walk with what we believe? Right? What we believe, and also, taking one step farther, what we do as a result of that belief. What kind of actions we take because of what we believe. Right? Do we ever deal with those topics? So if you guys relate to that, then you're in the right room, right? Because this is the book of James. James deals with all these topics. Just some of the things as we go week by week here, some of the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to get into practical advice on wisdom. Right? So wisdom is a big thing. It's a big topic that comes up in the book of James. We're going to talk about wealth. We're going to talk about even the word oppression, what people do as a result of wealth and people who don't have wealth. Materiality. Right? We talked about that word, materialism. Favoritism. We talk about people treating some people differently than other people. We're going to talk about the tongue. That's whenever people think about the book of James, that's one of the things that probably pops into your head, right? Think about controlling the tongue and godly speech. And then we're also going to talk about faith in action, which is the practical topic for our Christian life. So that's why I like books like James. It's like, this is super practical advice to the church at large, which we are a part of. And so not only the topics, but also we talked a little bit last week about the delivery of the book of James. Do y'all remember, anyone who was here last week, or if you've studied at other places, who the author of the book is likely, or was likely? Who wrote this book?
Jesus' brother, James.
Brother, yeah.
Okay, so there are a few James in the Bible, but Jesus' brother James likely wrote the book. And so what kind of insights do we have to his experience and the way that he may present the gospel or present the message based on who he is, based on his life? Like, how did that translate into his writings?
And being a brother of Jesus would be very difficult to praise and honor and worship your brother.
Mm.
Pretty good.
Yeah, and we actually talked about that a little bit last week, right? We talked about how your family they're the ones who see you at your worst, right? They've got the dirt on you, and so you would expect maybe some of that to kind of creep into James's writings, but the book is entirely complimentary of Jesus, of the gospel, of his message, and so to me, at least, that's a great testament to the life of Jesus, that his brother would have nothing but good things to say. Right? I agree with that. And we also, we're very familiar. We've read the Gospels. We know how Jesus spoke. We know who he spoke to. We know what his message was. And specifically, when you look at something like verse 12, chapter 1, verse 12. Can someone just read that for me, please?
Blessed is the man who endureth temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him.
All right. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life. What does that language remind you of? Does it remind you of any other passages in the Bible?
The Beatitudes.
It reminded me of the Beatitudes as well. You guys see that connection? I thought it was interesting that, you've got Jesus giving the Beatitudes, you've got the brother of Jesus seeming to use similar delivery, similar words. I thought that was interesting as well, just in terms of like what we're expecting to see in this book and how the message is presented. I think that bodes well. So I think maybe James picked up a few things in his time with Jesus, right? All right, so we talked about all these different topics, all of these things that we've agreed, we're together on this, things that we wrestle with, things that we encounter in our Christian walk. One more thing that we're going to talk about, and specifically talk about today, is the topic of temptation. So don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand if you deal with temptation in your Christian walk. All right. So pretty universal, something that we all go through, and often. Yes, sir. So let's take a little bit of time today to drill down on that. I don't expect we're going to make it very far in the book today, but we'll at least give it a start. Let's focus in on temptation or harassment. So if someone can give me, good morning.
Is it all right if I come to the adult class?
Well, should we take a vote, or
You gotta say the password.
do you have the password or some money, or I guess as a teacher, I guess I get to allow it for today. All right, we voted. We'll let you in. So if someone can give me James chapter 1, small passage, verses 2 through 4. Let's do James 1, 2 through 4.
Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and steadfastness have its full effect, and let steadfast have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing.
All right, so that's our passage. Let's focus in on that. We'll talk about a couple different aspects of it, but just starting off with the word trial. You know, when you hear the word trial, I know that things come into your mind or things that you understand and think of when you hear that word. Just to kind of on the nose say, you know, honestly, the first thing that pops into my mind is thinking about courtroom trials. You know, when you hear the word trial, well, we have a legal procedure and we've got trials, right? So you think about things like, I don't know, the Menendez brothers, are you familiar with them? They're kind of in the news lately. I think there's been a movie that's been made about them and their legal procedures and their trials. Another one, this will date me a bit, but I remember back in high school, sitting in class, sitting in school, watching TV, watching this white Bronco drive down the road, right? You knew where I was going with that? Because maybe you guys think about that too. So yeah, like one of the first things I think of when I hear the word trial is O.J. Simpson, right? And you know, he had his trial, he had his dream team, right? It was who was it? It was Johnny Cochran, right? It's the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit, right? And he had I think it was Robert Kardashian. I don't know what happened to his family after that. I don't think they've been heard of again, right?
Very low-key family.
Very low-key, very humble, very don't like the spotlight. But when I think about trials, I think about, you know, legal trials is one of the things I think about, and that's, in my mind, I kind of connects a few dots, because when you think about a trial, you think about, like, say you were on trial, what would be going on? Well, you would be charged with something, right? So there would be some kind of accusation of wrongdoing, where you would be going to this building and you would have this jury, this group of people who were looking at you and hearing your case and going to make some kind of decision on whether they thought you were guilty or not guilty. You know, you would have the prosecutor lobbing accusations against you. You would have the judge who ultimately, you know, was deciding if you were innocent or guilty. And so in my mind, that's making a strong connection between trials and wrongdoing, right? And I wonder sometimes if we feel like that is a reality, even not in the legal setting, but when we go through trials, like, why are we going through these trials? Is it because we've done something wrong? You know, is there something that we're guilty of? And so that's one thought that kind of went through my head.
We have to put a defense for ourselves.
Do we have to put up a defense? Yeah.
Against it. Yes.
Yeah, and I like that thought. Let's get into that. So when you all think about trials, legal or otherwise, what pops into your head, just in terms of the word itself, or even common trials, or if you really, like I said before, if you really want to get real, let's talk about what trials we're going through, right?
Walt Leader came to our church one Wednesday night and spoke. First thing he asked us to do is make a list of all the bad things that had happened in our life, maybe the worst things. And then he said, now we're going to have a moment of silence. I want you to thank God for every one of those bad things that happened to you, because they made you strong. And that really got to me.
Yeah. And we should talk about that. That's kind of the second part of the conversation is, what do we do with all of those trials? And I agree with Walt, but let's flesh that out and see exactly what he may have been talking about and how that happens. So when we're thinking about trials, what kind of trials do we go through? Financial. Okay, so financial hardships, perhaps related to, you know, job security. Are we employed? Are we unemployed? Does something happen with our income? Yeah. Family. Tell me more about that.
Decisions you made, decisions they made, separation maybe, walls, bills, yeah.
Okay, so Romulo's talking about could be personal trials, things that are happening to us, but maybe not necessarily. Could be happening to people that we love, right?
Or happen to
or happen to you because of people you love. Yeah, decisions that other people made. Yep.
Loss of a companion.
Okay. So we're talking sickness, we're talking health issues, we're talking maybe death, loss of a companion. Yeah. Is that something that everyone can relate to? Yeah. If not personally, and again, that's something that we all eventually, if we haven't already, we all will experience that trial, right? And in this body, we're not going to last forever. Inevitably, our health will start to decline and things will happen. But even if it hasn't happened to us, it's for certain happened to someone that we love. And so that's part of our trial, something that we have to deal with. Absolutely. Any others?
Ethics.
Ethics, tell me more.
Well, in business, in relationships, sometimes you're faced with what's the right thing to do, what's the easy thing to do, what's the outcome of the choices you make. What would Jesus do? Going that far, but it's like, let's say in business, there's a choice to make, and do you need to charge a customer for something or not? I'm a project manager, and so sometimes I'm looking at it. This is my scope of work. This is what the customer agreed to pay to. Now, here's something that, is it part of that scope, or is it in addition to that scope? Can I make more money and improve the bottom line by charging them for it? Or should I say, this is close enough to being in the scope that I'll look the other way and leave it in the scope and not charge them extra? It's customer service rolls into that. What's the right thing to do? Your boss rolls into that. Are you making the money? Are you representing the company? Or are you representing the customer?
Mm-hmm.
And so, ethics becomes sometimes a bit of a dilemma. Personally, I try to make both happy. Sometimes I have to charge the customer for something, but I make sure that it's obvious that it was in addition to the scope. It was outside of what our plan was. And that same concept applies to dealing with your friends. It's our friendship kind of has these boundaries, and you kind of cross that boundary. How do I need to address this issue with you, or do I need to look the other way and hope it goes away?
Yeah. So, all right. So James is talking about work life. He's talking about personal life. I heard some of the things I heard were, what can I do at work to make more money? Right. What's going to be good for the bottom line of me or my company? What's going to help me maybe look better on this given project? Maybe get ahead in my career. Some of these things are decisions that we have to make at work. And not to get too political, but these are things that our elected officials it's very easy to look at them and to think about these ethical issues, right? When there's money surrounded, when there's power, decisions that are being made. So yeah, very common issues. And then in our personal lives, it's dealing with people that we love. Sometimes even what we choose to say or not say. Do we want them to like us? Do we want them to be upset with us? Are we trying to make that person happy, or are we trying to help them to be a better person? Sometimes those are two different topics, right? So, yeah.
If we don't feel like we have the knowledge to do or say the right thing, then, well, we might doubt what we say and not say anything about it. For fear of not knowing, you need the wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So you turn to God to get that wisdom, and don't doubt. He'll stand for you. He'll stand up for you.
Yeah.
He'll give you the things you need.
That's
your faith.
If you're faithful. Yeah. And sometimes without that wisdom, we don't have the confidence, and that impacts our decisions and what we say. Absolutely.
Some people have mental illness in their family, and that's very hard to deal with.
Mm-hmm. It is. What did you guys think about, so Harvey talked about that a little bit, right? He didn't say mental illness, but there's a lot of upset or disturbed people in the country, right? And some of the things they're telling them to do are to disconnect from their families. Had you all heard that before Harvey mentioned it? So I think it's been in the news, but yeah, psychologists, psychiatrists are telling people to, just go ahead and separate from your family, and that will make you feel better. I don't know, maybe not. We'll see. But it's a trial. It's something that is maybe some of you are going through that specific issue, dealing with family who are frustrated with the way things have been going. All right, so a lot of trials. Apparently, it's a common thing for people, for most of us, for all of us, to be going through trials and temptations, and we will definitely expand on that topic through the book of James. But I wanted to just pivot for a moment and do a little brainstorming here, because James wants us to not just grin and bear it. He doesn't want us to just kind of cope with our trials, or disconnect and wait till they blow over. He wants us to actually get something out of them. So how do we do that? James asks us to consider it all joy when we're going through those trials, when we're facing those trials. So first of all, let me just ask, sorry, I get philosophical at times, and so let me just kind of throw out the question, what do you understand joy to mean? What is joy? It's a character in Inside Out. It's happiness. Okay, that's part of it.
Peace.
Peace. Okay, part of it.
Enthusiasm.
Okay. You guys are very optimistic. I like that. You're looking at the positives. I love it. All right, so happiness, peace, satisfaction, enthusiasm, these are really good things. Anything else?
The joy of the Lord is our strength.
Okay, so it can be a source of strength. The joy of the Lord, that's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? The Lord being joyful. Yeah, I like that picture of my Heavenly Father. Anything else? And think about joy, because to me, to kind of betray my understanding and where we're heading with this, I view joy as a little bit of a complex emotion. I think there are simple emotions, simple things to comprehend, and then I think there are things that are more nuanced, more complex. And joy, I think, is one of those. Doug, what do you think?
I feel like the joy can have a subtle, where it's just, you feel comfortable, you feel that you're doing the right thing, that you have confidence that that the Lord's working in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So even though you don't necessarily like what's happening to you, maybe you're not thrilled about your situation at any given time, maybe you can have this deeper kind of understanding or comfort level, knowing who's in charge of it and maybe what the purpose of it is. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, and I think that this verse we're just looking at, it's been in my work life where I've made major mistakes and really cost some money, serious money, and I learned a lot, and I feel that was kind of the way I learned wisdom in that situation. I never made that mistake again. I spent the effort to make sure I was doing it correct instead of guessing something.
Yeah. Not to pick on you, but we'll follow up on that here as we close out today. And Hollis, not to pick on you. You said happiness. But let's talk about that for a second. And if you think this is semantics or I'm splitting hairs, that's okay. It's feel free to push back. But I think a lot about happiness versus specifically holiness, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But even in this context, being happy about something versus being joyful about something. Like for instance, I don't know if James is asking us to always be happy when we're going through these trials or these situations. Would you all tend to agree with that or disagree with that, or no opinion? You want to hear more? Do you think he's asking us or demanding that we, kind of smile and be really happy about what's going on in our lives? Or do you think it's something else?
I think it's a way of learning.
Okay.
I don't often look to a paraphrase. I was taught the evil of paraphrases as a child. But sometimes when I come across something in the version I'm reading, I'll go get somebody else's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So First Opinion, chapter 2, verse 3, kind of says, you know that under pressure, your faith is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try getting out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work in you to become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. I've been sitting here pondering that and thinking about it. Okay, so we're talking about trials. We're talking about tribulations. We're talking about, should we try to get out of it? I don't want to deal with that. Let's stuff it and wait until it blows over and then go on with life. What it's saying is, hang in there.
Mm-hmm.
Go through the struggles, because when you come out of it, you're so much better than you were before you went into it. And as you deal with these struggles as a Christian, your true colors show, and others will wonder, how are you able to stand up under this pressure? How are you not buckling under the trials? So you become something or someone that is kind of admired by others. They want to know how you did it. They want to have what you have.
Yeah.
So it actually can become a way of outreach.
Can absolutely become a way of outreach. And I thought Doug left because I said I was going to pick on him, but I'm glad he's back.
No, he like me.
Getting it out here, I do.
We're going to talk about fight or flight. I thought he fled, but no, he's back to stand up. And so yes, to question more and to think about what am I meant to be learning through this experience, not to try to avoid it. And the reason that you may want to avoid it is, and that's kind of one of the points I'm making, is because trials don't always, I think maybe rarely, they feel good, right? Rarely do our trials, make us super pumped to be going through them, right? Or really, really excited or happy, if I can use the word happy. So that's a little bit of the nuance that I'm seeing when I read into this word.
Well, on the contrast with that, when God answered your prayer, you being happy and joyful, able to witness and say, I know that was from God.
Yes, and that hopefully will happen in the here and now. For some things in our life, it may not happen until we're with them. And then we're going to be more joyful, we're going to be happier, we're going to be more excited, enthusiastic than we ever have before. Yes. Yes.
Lord, do this for me. Fulfill my need.
Yes. So that can be definitely reassuring.
Yeah.
But do you all see where I'm heading with this? That I personally see a distinction between joy and happiness. I don't think, so for instance, if we are not extremely happy to be going through a trial, I don't think that's an unchristian thing. Okay? I think we should always be joyful, meaning what we've been talking about. We should try to understand what it is doing for us, how we're growing as a Christian. We should seek to have that understanding, but to be always just really happy to be going through this trial, I don't know if we need to be there. And one example of that occurs to me is, think about think about the day. I think most of the folks here, all of the folks in here, were or are married, right? So we've got marriage that we can use as a reference point, right? You think about your wedding day. Your wedding day is, for most people, it can be anxious, but it's a happy day, right? You're excited to be there. You're happy. Everyone is coming there to support you and to wish you well, and it's a happy time, right? And a joyful time. It's a happy time. Same with your day of baptism, right? On the day that you get baptized, it's a really happy, exciting occasion, and then those two things are kind of related. But as you go through your marriage, and everyone here has had some time in marriage, yeah. As you go through your Christian walk, everybody here has had time in their Christian walk. Not all of that time is happy, is it? There's some ups. There's maybe for some people. Or were you agreeing with me? I got you. You don't have to say anything. But there's ups and there's downs. There's trials in our Christian walk. There's trials in our marriage. But all of those things have a purpose. Can have a purpose, right? Because when we're newlywed, when we're new Christians, there's a immaturity there, right? And in many ways we've been untested in that relationship, right? It's a relationship with our spouse, a relationship with our God. We're kind of untested in those things, and so it's only through like having the experience, having that journey, with our Lord or with our partner, that I think we really kind of deepen and add context and character to that joy that we have. That's why, like me personally, I see joy as a much more powerful emotion and powerful, expression than I do, just happiness or contentment or things that we should have, but than those other things.
Can I say something just
Yeah.
really quickly? I'm reading right now the NIV in Spanish, so it's a different translation a little bit. But it's getting to that point, so I've been looking at English later on. We got exactly to your point, where this is the translation from the Spanish, saying, and with that persevere, it will lead you to the happiness. So it doesn't say with the persevering, you are happy. It doesn't say with the you are happy because you persevere. What it's telling you in Spanish, again, the translation is saying, with that perseverance, it will lead you to the happiness. So it's like you're saying, in that trial you might be not happy, you might be not comfortable, but after that perseverance, that's what's going to lead you to get into the happiness. Also adding up into that, there will be many trials in our life where we might don't get to that ending that we want, then we think we want, So you might not be happy at the end of that trial. But that's the trial you are going through. That's the life you're going through. That's the situation you are going through. It's your life, So you have to embrace that too. That's something what's really interesting that you mentioned in the Spanish version. Lead you in that way too.
Yeah, and I like that because it gives you the sense that it is a journey, right? It's not like a point in time when it's just you're given that joy. It's a lot of it is your life experience that kind of adds to that story. And to pivot to what was talked about earlier, and we need to finish on this, is what's the point of it? Like we're supposed to stick with it. We're supposed to have joy, but what's the end goal? Like what were you talking about earlier? What are we looking for out of this? To learn something.
And to be with God. You don't want that trial to take you away from God, which happens.
Yeah.
So also as a Christian, many trials we face every day, they might be pull you away from God, they might be pull you closer to God. As a Christian, what we're reading in James, what the trials have to mean for a Christian person
Mhm.
is to bring you closer to God.
I like that.
And I think about, I mean, it says the testing of your faith produces patience, but I think about endurance, like to keep going. I mean, it's hopefully going to grow our faith, but it's also going to help us to not give up and to grow closer to Him and know that we have to keep fighting for the race. Like it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
So
You know about that?
We know about that.
Yeah.
And God is not going to make us do that. Correct?
You're
God-
speaking in marriage, you need to be swift to hear but slow to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be listeners,
Mhm.
you know, instead of back and forth, back and forth.
Yes.
Yes.
That you need to do all of those things to the point here in these just short verses here. You need to keep doing it, right? Because like you said, it's not. We have other options. We have different choices. You know, we've got that animal instinct. When we're confronted with this problem, this trial, you know, we can stay and fight and engage and lean in, whatever terms you're most comfortable with, or we can hit the road. We can flee, right?
You're not listening to me.
Right. I'm done talking with you, right? But to Crystal's point, that's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about these trials. James is asking for those to build endurance in us. And I see the word endurance. You mentioned another word. What are some of the other words that different translations has for that? In verse 3, faith produces what?
Patience.
Patience, okay. Steadfastness, perseverance. And these are all similar. Patience is kind of an interesting one because when I think about endurance, I think about me like building something myself, right? Like me acting, versus when I think about patience, I think about me more not acting, just kind of waiting, right? Which is two interesting ways to look at the same concept. And I wish I had more time on this, but just to get back to picking on Doug, because we have to do that before we. So why do we want to be tested? And that's a broad question, but maybe this helps. What helped me the most is to think, has anyone ever dealt with an untested person? Whether it be in your marriage, if you're newlyweds, or in your work, have you dealt with someone who was new and untested, right? Or in war, right? Like someone who hasn't, like for instance, me, when I'm trying to change my oil, right? And I'm not like an oil changing expert, but there's a lot of things I do myself because I'm cheap, right? Because I don't want to pay someone else to do it, and I haven't come to the point where I'm just going to pay someone else to do it, so I'll do it to myself. So I got to change my oil one day, and I get the oil pan under there, and it's perfectly positioned, and I take the cap off, and the oil starts to go in there, and it starts to flow all over the floor. I'm like, well, shoot, I didn't want this to happen, right? I wanted it to go in the oil pan. Like, what happened? Well, it turns out I needed to take the cap off the oil pan, or else the oil can't get in it, right? So, rookie mistake. But that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about dealing with untested people in life, at work. It's difficult sometimes, right? Because those people don't have the experience. They haven't gone through the learning or the trials to figure out if they'll make good decisions. And that's, I think, the saying that I came across, maybe you've heard this, are the tea bag saying. Have you guys heard about tea bags? People are like tea bags. Have you guys heard this one? You never know how strong they are until you put them in hot water. So, and then my joke in parentheses was that then in the South you add about 2 pounds of sugar to. Okay, sorry, it's a northern joke. So until you go through that trial, that situation, you're untested, and you really don't know how you're going to respond or react.
I heard a statement some time ago, Minister say, you don't, of course, like being tested, like we are sponges, and you don't know what's going to come out until you get squared.
Yes, there you go. I like the sponge saying too. You don't know what's going to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why we need to be tested, because we need to build endurance. We need to know when to go to God to ask for wisdom. Right? All these things that we're going to talk through in James. And just to close out with why do we need endurance? You know, why is endurance so important? What do you think? We need strength through our faith to finish what?
The race.
The race. And is this we've got a runner in our family. Are we talking 100-meter dash here?
No, we're talking about the spiritual race. That's
We're-
what the Bible, compares to the race.
We're talking the spiritual race, which is more like, if you're a runner, more like a marathon. Right? It's long. We're an Ironman. It is long and it is hard.
It's raining.
And it's raining and you're tired. And to Cortez's point, I mean, like, so I did an Ironman race. We did an Ironman race together. And when I started training for that race and got in the pool and needed to get to the point where I could swim 180 laps or something like that, you know, when I first got in the pool, I swam like 8 laps and I was exhausted. I was untested. I was untrained, right? But, you know, with time and effort, you know, you get there if you stick with it. And that's what we're talking about. It's a long, hard race.
I think that, you know, counted the joy, you know, that sometimes that's like I was talking about, is subtle, you know, I mean, when I went through that trial, it was absolutely no joy, you know, it almost ruined my father's business, you know, but once I learned that, then it really paid dividends, and I mentored a lot of people when I worked at Johnson Petroleum, and I think I was able to share with them how to be careful, and that gave me joy because it helped them.
You stuck with it, and you made the most out of it. You helped others with it.
And you stick with it because you got through one thing, and you figure, well, if I can handle that, I can handle this.
You can go a little bit farther, a little bit harder, and learn to make the most of that. So just to close out here, a couple more reasons why we endure, why we need to endure. I think we mentioned it earlier, because we are in a fight for our souls, right? Verse 12 talks about this crown of life, right? We all want that crown of life. We all want to be with God. And so to do that, we need to endure in the faith. We need to learn to turn to Him for wisdom. We'll talk about that as we get on through James. And the final point I'll make is that we are not just enduring for ourselves. And we made this point earlier, right? We're not just enduring for ourselves, for our own walk, for our own joy and our own blessings. We also endure for other people who depend on us. All of those people who came behind Doug were blessed by his trials, right? And his education, what he learned through those, and he was able to bless them. And so people who need words of encouragement, you know, they need those kind words spoken to them with our tongues. People who need to be clothed and fed, you know, who maybe aren't. People who need to be blessed or just heard. You know, people who we need to stop talking, as was mentioned, and listen to people at times. All of those things are our needs in the here and now. And we're not in a position to do those things for other people if we're not tested and in the right mind frame ourselves. So we need all that. So that's kind of a setting the table. We didn't make it very far. 3 verses? So on this pace, we'll finish up this class in 2028, I think. But it was a good thing to set the table, and next week we'll just continue on through maybe talking a little bit more about temptation. But have a blessed week, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week, Mark.
I think so. I hope so. We're gone.